Hey folks, how we doing? Welcome to another episode of the Heavy Metallurgy Album Club. And we got the usual suspects and a new addition to the crew for this evening. Mr. Brainsmasher, it's good to see you. It's good to see you back on the internet again. How are you this evening?
I am feeling great.
Excellent.
Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. Thank you for coming. Jim, Kellen, how you guys doing?
Jim,
Doing
go ahead.
Good. No, doing good, man. I started early on the Thanksgiving festivities, drinking a brewski. Carb because I am fat and I have chronic GI issues, but it's all good.
Welcome to old age. Welcome to dying. Anyway.
Oh, I have arrived.
Kellen, yourself, how are you? I see you're sporting some new wearables there.
Sure. So I'm doing pretty good here in my new Heavy Metallurgy shirt. Thought I would show that for this evening.
Jim should be arriving soon, I would hope. They should have been there today or tomorrow.
I got it. And what's cool was I was like, man, I'm thinking I might wear this tonight. I'm so glad I didn't, because we would be seriously nerding out right now. That would not be good.
Twinsies. Well, this is a perfect time to plug that t-shirt right there. That is the Necromantical Streams t-shirt that we just released last Friday. It is available. The link is in the description to both of our t-shirt designs. That particular design right there was designed by one Justin Bowling from Vestabon's Blood Box. He's a very, very talented illustrator, comic book illustrator, and other things as well.
How do you keep blood in a box? That's the question.
That is a good question. We'll have to ask him that when he comes on here very soon. He's going to be on an episode one of these days. But
hell yeah.
Yeah, very cool shirts, and they're available to anybody that is looking to clothe their visage. And tonight, what are we here for? The fine gentleman who Ben knows from Grim Teeth Productions sent us this CD to be reviewed. I don't know if he knew that we do this show or not, or he just said, please review it. So I'm like, okay, well, this will be the first submitted piece for the Heavy Metallurgy Album Club. This is Frontal Assault with Hazardous to All. And I'll start with a very brief history of the band. They were formed in Cedar Rapids, Iowa in 2016. Frontal Assault is a thrash-based power trio. The band has released one demo, 2 EPs, and their debut full-length Hazardous to All. Yeah, they're just new starting out. One super young guy and a couple guys in their early 20s. And let's start off with Ben. What was your first impression on this? This is kind of a local band for you, isn't it?
Yeah, so I mean, I hail from Cedar Rapids, so nothing good comes out of Cedar Rapids. So I thought, this is going to be pretty great. Cedar Rapids has always been nothing but cover bands. You can't have an art show or a DIY gig to save your life in Cedar Rapids. So I thought this was going to be meh. So, I mean, that is working to their advantage for me personally. So I was blown away by how much better they were than my expectations. But they didn't win me over and put me into tears. But being that I am kind of the nostalgic about my hometown, I'm proud to give these guys all my support, and I can't wait to see what they're doing next. Upon listening to it first, I love that it's like a DIY release. It's obviously self-recorded, but everything sounds pretty well balanced, and they're pretty talented songwriters. It's pretty obvious that they're super young and they're full of piss and vinegar and they're having a fucking fun time doing this shit. And that personality just comes through in spades as I listen to it. And that's just what I took away from it.
Right on. Kellen, what were your thoughts? Your first impression?
So first impression, I had seen Ben talk about this band. I think because you saw them live, you did a review and gave a recommendation to me. Yeah. So the first thing was how young they looked. That was the immediate thing, is they looked like teenagers to me. And for sure enough, they exceed my expectations in terms of what I thought was going to, be on this record. Everything from the artwork to the logo told me they were kind of going towards a old school thrash sort of revivalist thing. And I saw I forget the off the top of my head here, the Bong Rip Suicide as an album title, and I thought, okay, this is going to be either like enough of they'll be self-aware that they're having a good time and they are trying to take themselves too serious, and that will come over, or if they're going to potentially fail thinking that there's something essentially beyond, with a title like that and kind of the subject matter at play. So I was interested to see the impression that they would leave going through these songs, being so young, and with the kind of subject matter that they're covering, how seriously they wanted to be taken. So getting to this record, I guess that was my initial impression.
How about you, Jim?
Well, I love thrash, but I stuck this on and, got into the second song and then stopped it. And I was like, okay, I got to reevaluate here, because I was like coming into this as like thinking that it was, probably like a more significantly produced release, because, it's on a label, even, probably a small one of sorts. But really, this is a demo. You know what I mean? That's the quality level of the production. That's not a dig. That's just like I had to stop and say, okay, let me start this back again, coming at it from a perspective that this is like a demo, And once I did that, I was able to like really appreciate what was going on in a different level, because there are some like, serious production issues, I think, here. But musically, there's some really cool things going on. There's some really cool riffage going on, and I like the vocal and all that. And maybe some, to Kellen's point, some questionable choices lyrically, but there was a lot of that in thrash. And so as annoying as that could be, like, honestly, that makes it more authentic, because there was a lot of goofy, stupid stuff in thrash and some regrettable lyrics, even from bands that I really love, like Nuclear Assault. There was definitely some missteps here and there. So that was my first impression, was like, whoa, wait a minute, let me backtrack a little bit, because I was going down a path and I was like, kind of like, writing a bunch of stuff about like, why did, this sounds like this I'm like, what? And then I was like, wait a minute, I got to just back up and really approach this. And that helped me out a lot, to really understand the record better.
Right on. I agree with all you guys. First listen for me was, obviously decent sounding rehearsal demo. It's what it sounds like. It sounds like they recorded it live in their space. There's even like Mandate the Mind. They kind of fall out a little bit. It's not very tight. And I kind of admire the fact that they left the flubs in. I thought that was kind of cool, actually. Yeah. Knowing this is a young band, obviously I'm going to be a lot more forgiving. And I think there's a lot of really good musical ideas here. And though the drummer can get by, I think the album suffers a bit from lack of more enthusiastic drumming. I think the drumming is a little straightforward. He gets it again. He gets the job done. It sounds like a young guy, learning the instrument. And again, I think Ben said it's going to be interesting to see how they develop, because there are some good musical ideas here. But I wrote a question for this. It's very long-winded, people, so bear with me for a second. We're going to talk about nostalgia a bit, because obviously this band is they're kind of pulling from the 80s era, and the Metal Archive says they're a thrash/death band, and I don't hear much death metal in this. I really don't.
Yeah. There's, like, vocally, there's a little bit of death metal here and there, and I honestly wish that the vocals were, I guess, they had like less voices going on. I know there's like some Tom Araya moments, but there seems to be like some double kind of voices. I wish it was like more just like one voice that I could just kind of like let be the second layer to it.
Yeah.
But I would like that, if I was going to suggest something that they could do a little bit better, I would rather like just a little more energy to the vocals and have it just be like one thing, and maybe gang yells and maybe some, some schmear kind of wails here and there. Yeah. But having like two different kinds of back and forth kind of gets a little busy to me.
Well, nostalgia is very much a dominant factor in metal. I mean, a lot of the older bands, it makes them continue to be relevant. People, I think the older era of metal still is very relevant today. And part of it is because of nostalgia. How do you guys think a very young band like Frontal Assault, I mean, they're clearly influenced by the thrash masters of yesteryear. Do they uphold that old spirit effectively? We'll start with you, Ben.
Starting with me. I do. I think we're all charmed by the amateurishness of it. And I think that coupled with the personality and the attitude that they bring is what feels nostalgic to me anyways. Obviously there's, cutthroat thrash riffs and drumming going on, but like the amateurishness to it and the energy that they bring and the like tongue-in-cheek topics to it are just like, that's really what throws me back, along with the standard issue thrash riffs and vocals. And to back up a little bit, my first impression of them was actually that I saw them live and they blew me the fuck away. And I will say they're way more fun live even than the album is. As much fun as I have listening to it, catching them live is just like, they blew everybody off the stage, I swear.
Right on. Jim, we'll go with you next. I don't even remember what the damn question was. I mean, do these guys do a good job upholding the nostalgia?
Yeah, I think that the arrangements, the riffs, the subject matter. I mean, these guys are definitely touching upon that vibe. But what makes it a little different and makes it a little more relevant is I the vocal with like kind of like the raspy, lots of reverb on it, like it's like a Black Death vocal, like oh man, I can't think of their name right now, or a noir or something like that. You know what I mean? Like I kind of hear that, and I love that, and I think that even though or noir, of course, is black thrash. That's what gives it more of like a little bit of a black feel. I hear what Ben's saying on, like it's a matter of time where he suddenly goes like death metal vocals a little bit, and mixed with some talking, like too much is going on, and they kind of lose me there. And I do think that Ben has hit the nail on the head. Hey, stick with like that Black Death, Black Thrash vocal, raspy, lots of reverb. That keeps your stuff sounding evil, but not detracting from the thrash. I think actually making it a little bit more modern. So they hit the nail on the head with that. I will say that for me, though that questionable lyrics, I'll kind of go back to what I said earlier, kind of like, keeps it authentic in that 80s realm. I don't know that I feel like we've moved beyond that, and it's okay to move beyond that. I think that the riffs are great and of thrash and the arrangements, and I love it and I still listen to it, but I kind of wish they would have taken the lyrics somewhere else, because we've done that sort of like party vibe before, with the bong rip suicide thing. We've got Municipal Waste bringing that back, and sidebar, I hate those guys, but I do think it's an opportunity for them for growth to maybe like stick to the more serious side of the lyrics, or even if you don't, just like something that's a little less on the nose if you're going to be more happier or whatever lyrically. But but I want to go back to the riffs real quick, and not get too much off your question, Marty, but just to say that there is, if you pay attention, there's a lot of intricacy there in the guitar playing. The more I listened to it, the more I heard what was going on. This guy thinks about what he's doing as a guitar player. He's thinking about how he's stringing these riffs together. So I just want to call that out, that's really something. All right, I'll shut up.
One point to kind of bounce off of what Marty was saying about the drumming. As far as I know, the drummer is actually, they're kind of looking for a drummer because their drummer would prefer to be a guitar player. So he's a guitar player playing drums. And for that, I think it sounds...
he's getting the job done, but a real tight, energetic drummer would really hurl these riffs.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think what draws back from it, like production wise, is the kick drum is kind of not really even there.
Yeah. It's a lot of snare.
Yeah.
A lot of hard driving snare for sure. Kellen, let's talk about nostalgia for you. Did these guys do a good job? And I will add, I mean, can it even these days be effectively represented anymore without feeling disingenuous? I mean, I look at like bands like Midnight, for example, who are real heavy on the schlock, and people love it, but man, I'd really rather listen to Venom. You know, how does a band like Frontal Assault fit into the grander scheme of it, I guess?
So I do think age here plays a major factor in terms of, I mean, what does nostalgia mean to a 20-year-old? You know what I mean? Like, I think it's probably for musicians who are coming up at that time period. Like, I don't think they look at it as necessarily through the same kind of potentially exhausted themes, or have the same level of like trepidation getting into a genre like thrash, especially which has historically been very much a younger man's genre, right? Like, thrash out of all the bands has not aged well through the decades, I would say. Like, and it's in the same way that I think death metal has, or doom metal has, for example.
It certainly has a dated sound to it. If it was, you know, the old way. Yeah.
So I think to your point, we're all kind of forgiving about the musicianship and the production, so on and so forth. To personally, for me, like when I was listening to this, I felt nostalgic for like the thing that Jim mentioned. It reminded me of that like early to mid aughts thrash that was coming out. Like, that was sort of the initial place I went, which I can imagine for both Jim and Barty. Like, I don't know what you thought when that stuff came around, you know, if you were tired of it or exhausted or bored.
I loved R Noir. I thought they were exceptional,
but like,
in the scene.
I hadn't, you know, thought about Havoc, for example. I don't know if you remember them at all.
Yep.
But they're one of those 2000s bands that was clearly playing in a very specific style of American thrash metal that was attempting to sort of, I don't know, recreate a little bit of or interest or galvanize a new fan base that was not death thrash or black thrash, or, I mean, it was very much rooted in an 80s style of an American thrash sound. So that's where I went. So I felt nostalgic for what it meant to be 20 years old again. I mean, those bands haven't stayed with me personally. That sound didn't, you know, when I think about the bands that informed my sense of being 18, 19, 20 years old in thrash, those bands faded. They didn't mean over the long term. But I think there are thrash bands that are meaningful today for me who have progressed through the years. So, and I think that's kind of down the road. If we talk about Frontal Assault, like where's their lifespan or what's their ceiling? Like, you can do your demo Municipal Waste record, you know, the first time around. I think the audience potentially is going to be less patient, you know, full album, second album, so forth down the road. So I don't think personally they look at it as, you know, in the same level of nostalgia. But I mean, your point beyond that is what keeps us coming back, like, which I think is the next, the door you sort of open is like how formative those years are for all of us. Whenever that time period happens in your life, the records that I heard from the time I was, let's say 16 to 26, like, don't ever take those from me. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I will fight you for those records. And so I to some degree, they're in that place right now in their life, like whatever they're listening to, whether they're thrash or so on and so forth. I don't think they probably have the same hesitation or considerations that we do. But in terms of how I approach them and how I hear them, that's kind of the nostalgia that I'm up against. And further, you know, in the future, I'll probably take into consideration when I think about this band.
Those are amazingly excellent points, and amazingly excellent points. And the fact that you pointed out that it gives you more of a 2000s vibe, that might have been my point of, I guess I did not realize that. When I see the thrash tag, I see the cover art, you know, my point of reference for thrash is the 80s. I mean, I'm an old fart, and with nostalgia, it's really hard to pin, you know, is your nostalgia proper or not? Because that's really up to the listener, not the player. And with thrash metal, for me, it is just as much where I was at listening to those albums and how much they impacted my life at the time. And I grew with those albums. And, you know, these guys they're not afforded the time. They're just starting out, and they're kind of tapped more into a 2000s era. I guess that's where I was wanting that rush of nostalgia that I got, you know, when the first time I heard Holy Terror or, Agent Steel or, anything. And this band is not that technically, there is a bit of a black rasp in the vocals, and and then I think the whole disingenuous thing, these guys, when I wrote the end of that question, can it effectively be represented without feeling disingenuous? I look at bands like Midnight, and it just doesn't feel right or real to me. I don't know. Yeah. Again, I would much rather listen to Venom, and that's the old guy get off my lawn type stuff, but people seem to love it, and it's fine. But one thing Midnight does have is they've got a bit of a charm in the songwriting. And to these guys, Kellen also said, what's the doors open for these guys now? What are they going to do with this? Are they going to write something that's going to inspire people to come back and keep spinning this? I mean, I like this. This is fun. But there isn't a whole lot on here that's going to make me want to listen to it over and over and over and over and over again. And, again, it's their first release. It's a demo recording. It's a rehearsal recording. I hope things get really tightened up on the next one, but we'll get to that here soon. Let's discuss the musicality and composition of Hazardous to All. Ben, musicality, composition. What were your thoughts?
I was impressed. Like when I saw them live, I was having so much fun that I didn't really pay attention to like composition and their all arrangements. But yeah, I've listened to the album maybe 20 times or so when I first got the disc, and I didn't get sick of it. And I put it on the night, and I had fun listening to it again. And that's pretty impressive for a thrash album to be replayable for me. And this is a genre that I don't really care about. And especially like, I haven't listened to a thrash band who like started post 90s, maybe more than 5 times in the last 20 years. So I don't know what's going on out there. I don't know what Havoc sounds like or Revocation or any of that stuff. Like, I don't know what's going on. So these guys might have gotten into thrash by way of the things like that and found their way to the 80s stuff and said like, that's what I want to do. But I might be wrong, but I think that's kind of what I'm hearing. And that's what made me really appreciate it more than I expected to. I think they're going 80s.
Yep.
Fourth Century, Annihilator.
Yeah. Yep.
Coroner.
All right, Jim, discuss musicality and composition.
Ben, I love that you said fourth century because I was thinking that too, man. I was thinking, that's so cool, man.
Uncertain future.
Like,
woo.
Yeah, that's
also
a great fucking record.
Also, Invocator.
Okay,
that's good stuff too.
Awesome. So musicality. The first little intro thing, like I said, there was some a huge Hell Awaits throwback, man. I think the drum beat is exactly the same as the intro to Hell Awaits. The riffs are kind of similar. And then and one of those things that kind of made me stop and like, okay, I gotta start this over because when it goes in from Incoming Disaster to Hazardous to All, the second song, which is like the real first full-on track, suddenly like the recording level drops. Like the recording level's really high for the first intro song, and then it drops really low, and it stays at that low place like the rest of the record. So not sure what was going on there, but it was super abrupt. And it definitely threw me off some. But production aside, though, we'll stick to musicality for now. The riffs are really interesting. I mean, obviously,
they are
true blue thrash riffs, but the guy does some great scales and runs there. He has a good use of thirds, like especially on like Don't Go Towards It. There's some evil sounding moments on that, even though they're played with like a freneticism that's throughout. I mean, it keeps it thrashy. If you kind of pay attention, there's a little bit more darkness going in there that I think pairs well with his vocal choices of that black thrash sound. The bass is really cool, does a lot of interesting things. It's up high in the mix. I kind of wish it was even higher, honestly.
Really? I thought it struggled to cut through on maybe it's my headphones. I don't know.
Yeah, well, headphones make a difference, man, because on my AirPods I couldn't hear it at all. But when I put on like these right here that I'm wearing now, I heard it great. So yeah, different headphones definitely
could be the frequency response.
Yeah, once I put these on, I heard it great and it sounded a lot better. I still wish they were up higher in the mix because I do think he's got a very interesting sound, kind of like a distorted Dee Verney of Overkill sound a little bit, not as clangy, but definitely some cool clang there, which I think gives us some instant thrash cred. Musicality, we've already touched on the drums. Like, I think that you can tell this guy, now that I've got that background band, it totally makes sense because I feel like the drumming is adequate, though a little uninspired. Some of the fills are really simple, and there are some timing issues, like on on Red Skies, Tyranny and Destruction. There's a little bit of a too long of a wait with a cymbal grab. It's like, it almost feels like he's stumbling a little bit. And on the breakdown, where they go halftime, like, you can feel him slow down and then he comes back up, I'm a little okay with that though, because like, this is supposed to be raw, this is what they're going for, the thrash bands with that kind of, black and white DIY punk cover, they weren't playing to fucking clicks, you know what I mean? And these guys aren't either. And that's okay. Being that, probably most of us here on this are musicians. It's hard for us not to hear those things and to understand what's happening. But, hey man, War Master from Baltimore's got some really shit drum timing on it as well. And it's one of my favorite albums of all time. You know what I mean? So I'm certainly not going to dig, a bunch of young guys who are just starting out for having the same thing. So I think it adds to, like we mentioned earlier, it's their charm. But I do think that musicality, aside from the guitar player, because man, that guy's riffs are badass, his solos are badass, and the bass player, I do think that they need a little bit of a drummer that can kind of keep up with them, and that would really round them off. And give some more love to that drum set. Think a little bit more, to Kellen's point. I love how you worded, Kellen. You were right. Like, that's sort of like really concrete, lyricism that comes with old thrash. I think is part of why thrash, doesn't linger long, even with guys who lived during that era. Like, as soon as death metal and black metal came along, well, we're listening to death and black a lot more than we revisit our old thrash stuff. And that's because, that sort of like really concrete lyricism doesn't stay with you once you get a little bit older. You want something that's a little bit either darker or more, it's either going to be something like Death that we contemplate every day, or something like, The Woods, man, something that really carries us away. And, so I'm curious to see if they can like somehow find a way, even if it's like a real, like hardcore political grab, like Napalm or something, but do something there, that to give it more like long-term legs. But for an early album, for an early band, they're right where they need to be. You know what I mean? But they just gotta work on the production. They gotta get a better drummer.
I don't know what you're talking about, man. Bong rips are eternal. All right, Kellen.
Yeah, I'm just kind of on cleanup crew here, so I really agree with everyone you've had to say. I was very much impressed with the solos for such a young band to have like competent. So there's a whole lot of thrash bands who can play, sort of mirror the riffs from their favorite bands, but to come out with like compelling solo work as such a young player, that really stood out to me. As much as I'm giving the Bong song a little bit of a hard time, the solo on that song is tremendous. Like, it's like one of the highlights of the record. So I was really impressed with the solos. And I also don't want to gloss over, like, as much as they are sort of mirroring or taking their influences and putting them sort of center stage in terms of the riff writing, there's a whole lot of, from someone who's not I will admit, Jim, I'm not a musician, so I could imagine
Yet.
there's a whole lot of opportunity to sound terrible mirroring the bands that you love, right? Like even if you can try and write a Slayer riff or a Demolition Hammer riff, it can be a terrible failure. And one of the early standout features for this band was I was completely like, yes, this is how you would do it. Like if I was inspired by 80s thrash and I wanted to write riffs, like if this was my first full length, I would be pretty, pleased with this. I think they pull that off. They understand even like the more basic transitions from how to go to like a verse riff into a breakdown. Like you can fumble those dynamics. Yep. And they execute those, I think, rather well. You could say they're rudimentary, but this is their first release, right? First full length. So I was actually pretty impressed for such a young band to be able to do those things competently. To some extent, like I will require a whole lot more down the road to stay listening. That's Agreed. Not going to keep me glued to my seat, in the years to come, because that's been already established. But I'm going to I brought a little show and tell for the end of this just to demonstrate my point. So,
okay.
I'm hopefully in the future they can kind of build on what they've already put out there.
Yeah.
Right on. Again, I'm cleanup crew here, but the guitar work was, to me, once I got past the overall, the sound of it was initially, I think Jim made the comment early on that he had to reset, started listening like, okay, this isn't what I thought it was going to be. It sounded really rough around the edges. I wasn't expecting that. And I had to go back and, really start to piece apart the guitar work. And the guitar work stands out for sure on this album. I mean, there's no blast beats on any of the songs. A very energetic attack, but the band about the midway point starts to rely a bit too much on a mid-paced, this kind of a stride, I guess. And, coupled with the fact that the drummer is just kind of holding on, he's not really, throwing a lot of creative stuff into it. That kind of gets boring for me as a listener halfway through. But the musicality, the guitar riffs, the thing I really liked about them that stood out for me was, you guys are all right, the solo work was surprisingly melodic. And, you think of back in the day, Creator, Milla would just go make a horrendous mess. And
what do you mean, man? It was amazing.
Yeah. But Anthony Thomas is the guitar player and backup vocals, it looks like. He is a very melodious player, and his riff ideas, they're longer phrases. They're not like just every, how many ever beats repeating. The riff, it starts and it goes on a little bit of a journey. It goes a little extra step. I don't know how to explain it in musical terms. I'm a musician, but I'm a shitty one. But
same.
Yeah, I just like the longer phrasing of the riffs. It allows the music to become a lot more interesting instead of just, every 4 or 8 beats, the riff repeats. It seems like he's taking it a little longer before repeating the riff again.
Something in songs that short, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
To feel like that guitar is taking you somewhere in a 2.5, 3.5 minutes, like,
yeah,
that's a testament to his capabilities. I mean,
absolutely.
That guy, if he sticks with metal, give this guy another record or two, he's gonna be really, really killing it.
Yep. And I think it's very ambitious at times, and that's when the midway point, when the song started to really kind of drag on for me, it was a little bit of a disappointment because I wanted that innovation to kind of go throughout. But we'll talk about that here in a minute. Production, I mean, we can talk about it again if you guys want, but it's a rehearsal demo, and it sounds like they recorded it live. So can we all agree? Oh, wait, Jim does have points. He had some stuff to talk about the production. So
I just, and this is a little anecdote of mine, and I'll keep it brief. But in my very first band, 14 years old, we're trying to record, quote unquote, and we had heard that you could get a good drum sound if you put your boom box or whatever in a dryer.
What?
Yeah,
while it's spinning, I hope.
Yeah, this is 1988, and so we did that. We threw it in there, And needless to say, it sounded horrible.
No.
I gotta tell you, man, the kicks on this reminded me of that. There's some kind of weird warble going on with the kicks, man. That was just like, I was like, what? I was like, what the hell? I thought that's something was going on with my headphones, but it totally brought me back to that, like this weird reverby warble, like when they're doing double bass. I don't know what's going on with the kicks, guys, but please don't do it anymore. Speaking from someone who's made those mistakes, it's not the good way. And also the snare was way too high in the mix too.
Too piercing. It gets to be a bit maddening as the album goes on, actually.
Yeah. So pretty much, reevaluate the drums, please. But yeah, we'll keep it there because I think you're right. We're being a dead horse about the production, but I just want to
yeah. Rehearsal demo. You can hear everything can be heard. It gets the job done, and it gives it a good organic feel. If anybody has anything more to add, feel free. Least favorite songs, Ben.
As much as I don't like the title of the track or like the lyrics are kind of cheesy, but Don't Go Towards It.
I love that song.
That's the standout right there.
That's the jam on the album for sure.
And like it feels weird to like be singing along with the chorus and the words to it are like "Don't go towards it." Like,
yeah,
I get it. Like I wouldn't change anything about it, but it's just like I love that song and that's the one for me. But it's kind of weird. And then Bong Rip Suicide, I think like songwriting wise, that is really mature. It sticks with you. It's memorable. It brings you. It's like a good representation of what the album does at its best moments, and it's just hilarious. The like when I saw them live, Will the bass player, he just goes, "This song's about smoking pot until you fucking die." Like won me over.
I've done that before. Once. Remember that, Jim? Yeah, you were there.
I did, man. I did. I was actually worried about you. I've never been worried about someone that was high before, but I was worried about you.
Stupid drug. Whatever.
And I think there's a point that I haven't made yet. Is like it plays. It's how do I put this? It just plays well as an album, even though it's kind of on the short side. It's like a long EP, short album. The way the intro is like a minute and a half long, and just kind of serenades you into what you're going to have. But like the length of it is fine. I think the songs being kind of short is like adequately self-aware. And just the way that it plays is like kind of just right. There's so many things about this album that are just like tastefully done just right and show a lot of potential. So it's like, I think it's worth talking about a lot. So I like that we picked this one to review.
Right on. Kellen, how about you? Least favorite and favorite.
Right. So I will jump on as much as I have, I think the song title and lyrical content is hilarious. I also want to say the vocal cadence to that song reminds me a lot of a grind band called Cretin.
Yeah.
There's that kind of like rapid syncopation that reminded me right. I first heard that I was like, man, that reminds me of Cretin's Freakery, which was like in 2006 or something like that. But yeah, and I dig the solo on that one as well. I also want to take a moment to point out I think they just entitled it After. That sort of like acoustic.
Yeah.
I mean, it was an interesting addition on this record that I was like, can we explore this a little bit more on the next full length? Like, in the sense that they've got talent to do different things to a record to add, additional dynamics and sort of play with how a record would unfold. That track caught me off guard personally. Like I just did not see that coming.
It's just placed weird. It has no meaning in the album. It's just kind of like, look at this kind of cool thing we did, which is fine. But
I think it's like a perfect intermission to the final, like the best, like I think the song they made it put the most effort into. I think it's like, all right, you've had what we did before, and let's have one final like good song.
Yep.
And then out.
Yeah. And then I also would say like, you mentioned Don't Go Towards It. it was just like it solidified at some point in that song. I thought, okay, like as much as this is a young band trying to get their bearings, like to some extent, like they know what they're doing. So I mean, those 3 tracks, just I think I'm really coming back to that instrumental. I kept on thinking, like, can we do more here? So I know that's kind of an inconsequential track, but I do think it potentially shows that they have, more instrumental, capability than this album would otherwise let you believe. So I guess those 3. The one song that to your point, Marty, that I kind of felt was A Matter of Time. That's the longest song here. I think it's a little at 4.5 minutes.
That was the changing point for me, where the album started to kind of drag from that song on.
They just needed, there was something that was missing. You needed to add a solo or some kind of dynamic to break the monotony. There's a long, to your point about the phrasing and the riffs, it kind of carries through. And I thought we were going to have like some sort of climactic moment in the middle. And it didn't sort of culminate in that in any way. So that was the one song that I felt was like missing something or potentially had more to give, especially being the longest song on the mini LP or mini album. It just kind of needed an additional little flavor to it to really make it stand out. And that was kind of left me wanting more, I guess.
Right on. Okay. My favorites, I think the best song on the album is Don't Go Towards It. It's got unique riffing style that adds more dissonant chords into the arsenal, which is kind of interesting. It isn't just thrash riffs. They start messing with some dirty chords that kind of colorize the riffs a little bit more. The bass is doing some cool things, but struggles to cut through the mix. I must need to change my headphones when listening to it, Jim, because I'm like, oh man, there's bass there. It sounds like he's raging, but couldn't really hear it that well. Hazardous to All, the title track, interesting riffs, melodic and playful verse riff. That's all I wrote for that one. I liked it. Mandate the Mind, again with colorful and ambitious riffs, though the playing on this track isn't very tight. A few flubs that don't derail the song, and I'm glad that they left them. I don't know, it didn't take anything away from the song. It's just like, oh, okay, you stuttered a little there. Whatever. My least fave is basically the second half of the album. I did like that after track, clean instrumental with weird placement. Matter of Time was a turning point for me. Okay riffs, loss of energy, and too straightforward, I thought. Bong Rip Suicide has more of a crossover feel due to Julian Irish's From Electric Gravy. That vocal style gives it more of a crossover vibe, but Crossover's got really good drummers, and this guy he's hanging in there, but he's not really propelling the music at you. Red Skies, Tyranny, and Destruction, good feel, but still suffers from lack of energy. So for me, it's mostly all hits, and even the songs that drag a little bit, they're still good. I just want more fire. I want that piss and vinegar at the beginning to carry through to the end.
Yep.
But let's end up with Judgment. Final thoughts.
You skip me, Broseph. Yes.
Oh shit. I'm not used to 4 people here. I'm sorry.
I see that.
There you are.
Like,
shit.
What the shit? Right,
I'm skipping right over your ass. I got things to say, bitch.
Yeah, I do.
Sorry, Jim. There you go.
No, I actually completely agree about Don't Go Towards It. That song stood out to me. First listen, last listen. The vocals are great. The bass work is great. The solo is awesome. I love the Tom Maria scream at the beginning, the crazy high pitch going on there. That's where I started hearing the darkness and the rest. To Marty's point, I started hearing like there's some thirds played in there and everything that just made it more sinister. Yep. And so that one's definitely got star by it for me. And Hazardous to All, I think that once we get past the intro to Hell Awaits, that song is a great announcement to what this band really is and what you're going to have and what you're going to get. It's that one, when we're talking about energy, I think that it's got a ton of energy to it. It carries all the way through. I also got it, like we're all doing, we're calling out After. I did think it was a great instrumental, and when you can play that well, a little bit of showcase is okay. He's not doing Ingve or whatever, he's not wanking off, but he's showing that, they're not just ripping bong hits. There's a a little bit of heart behind what they're doing, and I think After is emblematic of that. But Matter of Time, man, I actually drew a face and put barf by it. I really
that was a turning
like
point
it.
for the album for me, for sure.
That one, man, that one needs to be revisited. That's when he started playing around with different vocal styles, and it just was it was not cohesive. He started doing some death and some type vocals, which didn't work. And then he's saying something about talking shit on the chorus, which, man, we don't need any of that, bro. I'm gonna meet you outside the bar, beat stuff. I just felt like that could have been left off the record completely. And I think that the flow of it, would have been much better. So for me, that's the one like knock is I think Matter of Time's got to go. But other than that, I think everything else on the record makes sense. Even After with its like unbridled, melodicism. There's it kind of it ties the album together.
Yeah.
But yeah. All right. Now, Marty, you can go on with your next phase.
I'm sorry. Like I said, I'm not used to 4 people. It threw me off. We'll just leave it up with you. Judgment, final thoughts, Jim. We'll start you up first so you don't get skipped.
All right. Yeah, that's probably a good idea.
Yeah, probably
a face
good.
like mine, it's easy to forget a face like mine. No, man. These guys, all in all, this is a great thrash band. To Ben's point, I think that seeing these guys live would be a lot of fun. I can definitely hear good times in what they're doing. I can definitely hear some great musicianship from the guitars and the bass. And I like his primary vocal. Matter of Time notwithstanding, his primary vocal I think fits really good with the record. But I do hesitate to call this a full length. I think it'd be better off just saying that, hey, this is another demo. Because I don't think they're quite there yet. I think one more album, and with somebody to kind of, help guide them a little bit, and, with studio software, and hey, man, I'm not knocking how difficult it is. I don't have a single recording in my checkered past that I like. I hate every bit of production I've ever been a part of, so I'm not saying it's easy. But I am saying that if you want to, put out something that's going to connect with a lot of people or have them, to Kellen's point, return to it, there has to be like a baseline of like a production level that people can gravitate to. Because even if you're listening to like Zaster or something like that, it may be bedroom black metal, but there's a consistency in the tonality, consistency in the record levels, consistency in the EQ that you can listen to, from front to back. And so you want to get that. And hey, man, whether it means sell a car, get a second job, somebody
sell
dies,
some
a
weed,
little money, do what it takes, and spend a little more, and because that's what you're missing. You don't want to turn people off from your output simply because whoever was turning the knobs couldn't capture it. Do what it takes to get yourself there, because that's the only thing you're missing other than a little bit better of a drummer.
Well, that's, we've said that with the Glorious Dead from the start before we recorded our first album. It doesn't matter how good the fucking songs are. If the album sounds like shit, no one's going to give a crap. They're just going to focus on the fact that your album sounds like shit. I'm not saying this sounds like shit, but to your point, you completely nailed that. Great points all the way around for sure. That's why I didn't skip you this time, because I knew you were going to say something good. Ben.
I think what it comes down to is if these songs weren't awesome, we wouldn't be complaining about how they don't sound as awesome as they deserve to sound.
Yeah.
A couple of other sideline notes that you might be interested in. Will, the bass player, is the youngest one. He just graduated high school. He's 17 when he recorded this. The guitar player is 21, and the drummer is 24. They have new material on the way, maybe before the end of the year. So the timeline of as I understand them, I didn't know them before, I don't know, this summer, but they recorded some stuff, and their last stuff was out in March of 2019, and they just kind of sat dormant. And then this spring, they just kind of got back together and started writing this stuff and banged out this recording. And I don't think they had the intention of putting this out on a physical release, maybe. But then once Grim Night, which is Nightmare Imagery, and Grim Tooth merged into a label and promoting thing, approached them about just putting this out on CD, they're like, fuck yeah, let's do it. So I think they're working on better songs. They're going to put more effort, I think, into production for like a more fully realized full-length debut kind of thing. So I think everything that we're like probably suggesting that they work on, I trust is going to be paid careful attention to going forward. So I'm excited to see what they wind up doing. And they're playing live very, very often,
Cool.
which is kind of weird to happen here in Iowa. Like there are some metal bands happening and there are some metal tours coming through Iowa, which has not happened in fucking decades. So like this is emblematic of how excited I am about what's going on here in the dipshit state of Iowa.
Right on. Kellen.
Yeah. So one, I guess, thank you, Marty, for bringing, this is the first real demo that we've had, you know, on, I think on the album club. Is that right?
Yep. Yeah.
I mean, so for Ben for kind of bringing it to my attention, Marty for bringing it to the album club. So I think that has sort of forced a little bit of a different kind of analysis when approaching an album or a demo in this case, right? So while I was listening to this, I thought about like a thrash band that's going on today that I do like a lot. So this is the first record I heard from them. This is Grease's Rapture. Anyway, I really dig this band. They're playing in a death thrash style. But I heard this. This is what came out on Memento Mori in 2018. They followed up here. They signed to FDA, and in 2021 they released Malevolent Denies Incarnation. Like this one a lot. But I thought, since we're listening to a demo, what did it sound like when they first started, right? Like I'm catching them signed to labels. What does a band of this caliber that I love so much sound like? So because I dig them so much, I went back. This is on Witch's Brew, I believe, a smaller thrash label out of Germany. And if I had heard this right off the bat, I would not nearly be as excited, right?
Witch's Brew is back? Cheryl's back?
Yeah, it's gone, coming, you know.
Well, her husband
Right.
passed. He was a super nice guy. I used to talk with him in chat rooms back in the day. Anyway, sorry. Go ahead.
Still around, but I mean, that's from 2015. And I went back and I listened to that, and they're not nearly as, you know, competent and talented as they are now, right? So it was just a sign of like, if they're heading in that direction, nothing, you know, a lot of good stuff can happen. I think it'd be unfair to judge this demo essentially with the same kind of expectations and standards that, you know, I would often carry for an album club sort of analysis.
Right. Yeah.
So it was kind of an interesting exercise in that regard. But I think, you know, we've kind of talked about this, like it's exciting to have a band get, you know, the most, you know, the basics are there and there's a lot of, you know, room for growth in the future. So to hear Ben talk about they've already got stuff in the works. Obviously the young musicians. So if they're practicing and playing that often, you know, it's only going to improve, you know, so good stuff. I'm excited to see what happens next.
Absolutely. And I agree with all of it. And as my follow-up or my ending point was, not many surprises, though shows a lot of potential. And that's true. And the biggest surprises were the riffs and the guitar work overall. There's some really good songs on here, and Kellen, you're absolutely right. You know, this, though it was kind of released as their debut full length, even though it's a short album, it's very demo-ish, and it maybe isn't fair to hold it to the fire like we normally would. And I did enjoy it. I listened to it a good 10 times. It's short, so it's easy to hit repeat on it and, you know, really get a feel for it. Yeah, and especially hearing the fact that they're playing out so much. I mean, that's a big part. I mean, you get tighter as a band, you go out live, you know, us against them type of mentality, and the band can only get better from there. And I think they've got some really great elements they're working with here. It's going to be really interesting to hear what a better production, you know, a little bit better drum performance, and tighten up the song ideas. I think it's going to be a good band to follow for sure.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's it. We made it through that one, and I believe it's Kellen's turn to pick next week's album club. What have you got in store for us, sir?
All right. So let me get the year right, from 2011. I've been listening to this album. There was a new one released by this band this year that I'm absolutely loving. But I wanted to go back and revisit their previous release, which happened obviously a while ago. So this is Negative Plane and the Stained Glass Revelation. So
hell yeah.
I love this record. Yeah. Spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert, I used to own that and I got rid of it.
Yep,
oh, here we go.
To me.
What's the name of the album again? I forgot. I gave it to you?
Stained
Yeah,
Glass
I
Revelation.
think I traded it to you for something. Yeah, we traded something for it.
Stained Glass Revelations.
Jim, have you heard the new one?
I have not, man. Is it the Pact, right? Is that what it is? Is it good?
It fucking rules.
Oh, cool, man. I gotta check it out. Thanks.
Love it. Weirdly enough, I hadn't heard their first one until I just bought it a couple months ago, and I may listen to it twice. So I need to give it a proper. Well, we'll get back to it in next week, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, with that, I've got links to all these gentlemen in the description. I may have forgot to add Ben, but I will afterwards go back and do that. We got new t-shirts. Kellen is modeling it right now. It turned out really good. They're fun, a little silly, but kind of in tune with what we do around here. So definitely check them out if you want one. Ready to go for you. So thank you so much. And show notes for Friday. We've got
tomorrow, Marty.
Black Friday. We've got Melanie Loves Death Metal coming and Austin Lund from Panopticon coming on. There'll be no Alan. He's away with family doing Thanksgiving holiday things. So it'll be myself, Austin, and Melanie holding down the fort, talking about death metal albums that we love. Not necessarily the classics, though they can be. We're going to just be talking about, some good death metal. So that'll be a fun show for sure. Get ready and bring your drinks, because I think Austin's packing enough records for 150 people. So anyway, thank you everybody. We will meet you back here Friday and next week for sure. And lots of new stuff coming down the pike. We need to get sorted out. We're going to start really trying to push the channel a little bit in the coming year. So hopefully y'all come along with us for the ride. If you're not subscribed, please do so. And definitely go subscribe to these other gentlemen. And please go to Eihwaz Recordings and buy some tapes and CDs, because that gentleman down there has got some cool shit. But anyways, cheers everybody. Have a good Thanksgiving and all that good stuff. And we'll see you Friday. Cheers.
Later. Thanks, Marty.